Well, good evening, everyone. Our schedule has been a little different from a seventh ray schedule, we might say, but here, at least for Identify as Being, we've had some kind of regularity. I've also tried to, since I'll be on a train tomorrow night, and I don't know, I hate to start the thing and then find that it's canceled in the middle. So, the signal is not very good on those trains. But I'll just see what's possible. But I don't think that tomorrow night I'm going to have the Cosmic Fire. What I have been doing, though, is to send you some solo webinars on Cosmic Fire. And I'm not really going very fast at all. It'll give us a chance to discuss the matter when we next get together. So I'm planning two kinds of things. One will be solo webinars to sort of fill in the spaces, because the book is 1,283 pages long, and I know I'm not even counting the introduction and all the other things. So that will, take a very long time. And if we simply go with discussion, well, it'll take till about 2040 or something like that, which is time that is not available, it looks like. Okay, so anyway, I'm making available to you numbers 2, 3, 4, and I did a 5 today, and I really didn't cover a whole lot, but it ties in very well with what we're doing here with Identify as Being. Okay, well, today, let's see, just maybe to welcome you at first, and that would be Andrea, hi, and Anna, and Anne, or Anne, yeah, I get used to the Finnish pronunciation of these words. Hi, Anne, and Annette, and Asha. Catherine, Damien, Francois, Helen, Ishtar. I'll go back a little bit. Yes. Yeah. Karen, hi, and Kathy. Leah, Leslie, Loretta, Malcolm, and Nicholas, Risto, Sam, Stacia, Stephen. We're all over the world here. Tia and TU and Vicky. And Joe and I are trying to keep things straight on the other side. I was on one of those, it must be somewhere on my computer searches, because I had just finished an hour and a half of Cosmic Fire, and I decided to go up and smoke. And, after 3 hours, I found it. I still don't know how I'm going to get it to you, but I trust that I can. And then we'll, if I find I'm getting wonderful reception on the train, then I'll be there, and you can try it for a minute or two and just see if there is anything. And if it is as I expect it might be, I won't be there. But I'll find a way. It seems to me, we're doing two things at once. One is this great simplicity of being, and of isness, and of presence. It's beyond quality, it's beyond divisibility, it's beyond all such things. It is even more than unity. It's more than homogeneity, although that is a word that suggests it. It simply is, and we're dealing with the factor of isness in all of this, and then somehow realizing that we are that which is. And if we don't think so, it's only because our consciousness is captured by limited perception, because we are apparently limited beings, limited perception rather than by what I'm calling infuception, which is the registering of this all-pervasive presence. I'm sticking to the universe now, there's lots of speculation here about what transpires when the universe is not, and you'll just have to look at it as speculation. But the one thing that we seem to know is without doubt, at least according to the ageless wisdom, is the continuity of the absoluteness or of the absolute, and the immutability of this. I'm looking for words which are not necessarily proper words, but they they kind of give you a feeling for it. And I call it the immutability of the utter utterness. The utter utterness. Well, maybe it means nothing to you and sounds foolish. I don't know. But to me, it shows you just can't go beyond it, and it always has been and always will be, without beginning and without end, and is the absolute ground of all being. Now, I don't think we fathom that in universe, which is a finite situation. But we are that, and there will be a time in no time, when we will fathom this. Well, at least we'll come as close as we can without being it absolutely, which does happen periodically as well. So, all right, and there's more of us now, and welcome to everybody that just came in, Ivanka and TU and some others. I can't, Stacia and Rose and Risto. Yeah, okay, and Leslie. Right. So I'm just kind of welcoming you, and Bruno. About 7 or 8 of you just kind of came in at once there, and I'd already done the welcome. Now, we're dealing with identicality, and we're dealing with sameness, and I hope eventually beyond the conceptual level. Concepts are necessary, and they certainly make sure we don't get lost and we keep things in proportion, but they are like nothing compared to the experience or inperiences, I call it that, inperiences which we are beginning to have. And I don't think that the intensity of the inperience, if I can put it that way, for a human being is anything like what it is for a solar logos or a galactic logos, and on and on. I don't think the intensity of the perception of universal beingness is anything like for the little being that we are, like it is for the high being. But at the same time, I also think that cyclically and forever, according to the great breath idea and the law of periodicity, universes have to disappear in order for a return to what I call the absolute deity. And there we have as close as we can come to the utter utterness, and we are that too. And there will exist the perception of absolute infinitude. Now, infinities are hard to handle anyway, because you cannot complete them in a cosmos. But as I've been trying to say, when a universe disappears, we're back into the world of the absolute deity, which, by the way, is not the absolute, okay, at least in my distinctions here. The absolute deity, who can self-perceive as the great presence or homogeneity, or it can self-perceive as absolute infinitude. Now, we can't even get into what that can represent, because there are all kinds of infinities, and you start combining them, and it just leaves the mind in the dust, as Galileo found out with a much simpler experiment. And he just said, well, we cannot understand God. That was his conclusion, and I think he, was really right. But then again, it's like who is God after all? And once you lift sufficient veils, such as they seem to be when we, become tinier and tinier, when you start lifting those veils and return upon your emanative stream, you start returning on your emanative stream, then you begin to realize what you really are. And obviously animal man doesn't know this, and the animal doesn't know this, and we've been all that, but we start to know it now. And it just seems like it's endless, but it can't be in a periodical universe, or a universe which appears periodically according to the great breath. That is the one great assumption, that what is said about the great breath is true, and that we don't have an absolutely steady state universe, as some people try to prove. I think the universe itself is just the tiniest thing. I call it an infinitesimal. I get a little bit into infinitistic and infinitesimal mathematics without really being a mathematician, but just enough so that we can begin to think about what a point really is and what absoluteness really is. And we'll get into that as we go. The important thing for us is to be able to perceive, register all sensory input as being ourselves, as somehow being the same. Even though there is tremendous variety all around us, we have to master this art of infuception, I call it that, which appears in the heart. I find it there. And inside and in the heart, some great presence or isness or beingness or something appears along with the variety and overpowers the variety, so you know that all variety came from it, and then you know more than that, that all variety came from the real you. You are it. You are it. Okay, so let's just have a little, actually, I think it'd be best to have a meditation. By the way, I hope you got this. I was sending it out to you, this is, oh boy, lots of stuff. One day my computer's going to explode, and I will deserve it. Okay. But I keep on adding to this list about sameness, and then some coined words like samify and samification and so forth. And I keep on adding to the statements and questions, and I did hopefully send that out to you today, and if not, if you didn't get it, you'll be getting it, because all of these things are cumulative. And basically, I don't know how many pages I've got on this right now, but it's just on the samification thing. And then on the right-hand side, I explain further, but I haven't gotten to that yet. And I put in certain code words. So all of this is a work in progress. But I thought it'd be best, rather than just hiding away for 5 years and not saying a thing and then just disappearing over to the other side, that I kind of will work on it together. And your thoughts will be part of my thoughts, and we'll be refining things as we go. So that is my hope, and I must admit that as I'm doing this, I'm actually seeing quite a bit. I'm actually understanding more than I understood when I started, which is always a good sign, But then, of course, so many things arise which you can't touch it, you can't touch it. There's a new thing always on the horizon. So let's just see. Like I say, I'm not taking us away from Master Decay. I'm saying that's the curriculum of relativity. And we must, with meticulous entirety, which is the big quality that he represents, study it intensively. And at the same time, to have some feeling for the ground of all being, for the essential oneness of everything, for the isness and presence which out of which all things came, which is you actually and me, that's important too. So it's kind of like a being curriculum and a relativity curriculum simultaneously. Okay, now a little bit of something else. Let's just have a tomorrow morning. I'm the science of triangles at 5 o'clock in the morning GMT, and I've got a couple of letters here that I want to go over. The last time we did, it seems, kind of complete one of those letters to discuss it. Then I'm going to ask your questions, and where you are with all this. It's going to take a long time in timelessness for this to really begin to gel as the customary perception of all things. In other words, I remember, naturally, and probably you did too, I read a lot of the mystics when I was a young person in my early 20s and late teens, and I know I've been there. And these mystics would have their own language, and I would try to go with them and understand them. But the most important thing of all that came out of it, from that reading and from my teacher at the time, was, can you imagine what a person would be like with 6 planets in Pisces and Leo rising? This was the teacher, for me anyway. And he had somehow mastered the art of identification up to a certain level, and that I knew was the one thing that I really had to learn in this life. So I think that even though it's so simple that it's difficult, I trust that in addition to all of the mental cogitation, of which I know too much, and probably a lot of you do too, the utter simplicity of the feeling of identicality with the only thing that is really, it can be held simultaneously with this. Okay. So now let's see where we are here, and there is a kind of a, well, maybe I'll make a meditation out of this. Or maybe we need to discuss it a little bit after that. Okay. Okay, and we'll ponder. Okay, so friends, we'll get together and just trust yourself. The monad in you knows all this. The spirit in you knows all of this, and you have attenuated yourself through limiting self-observation, and you have descended into a veiled condition, and so have I, and all for the purposes with which we are familiar. But we can periodically unveil and return to a purer state of perception. So let's meditate together. The first thing is perhaps simply to look at the world around you, both the tangible world and some of the subtle worlds, like of dreams and thoughts and things like that, and to realize that the variety is stupendous. Everywhere you look, everywhere you hear, the senses, taste, touch, or smell. There's distinction everywhere. And the one thing you perceive, just forgetting the quality of things for a moment, is the boundaries between all that you register with your perceptual mechanism. This is a world of distinctions on every level and differences. And yet Master DK tells us there's only one heresy or incorrect mode of apprehending or thinking or registering consciousness, and that is the great heresy of separateness. So ponder on that for just a little while. How can we emerge from this trap of looking at everything as separate? And even when we harmonize things, maybe unify things, we still have distinction. It's just that it is harmonious distinction. I mean, notes that are out of tune with each other or in tune are still notes. So what does it really mean, as some of the old sages have said, and I think some Buddhists, to look in all directions and find only sameness? Look in all directions, everywhere, in, out, up, down, wherever, and it's all the same thing. What can that mean? Because obviously we have to believe our eyes in some respect. From certain perceptual levels, there are boundaries. So how can it also be true that there are no boundaries? And that is what we have to discover as, well, as we have discovered infinitudinously. There's only one being having these universes, and in all of its emanations, it has to wake up one day and realize it's only one thing. So there's a new program and a new archetype and a new universe at the moment, but that discovery of where it all came from, well, we have to redo that, as ever we have done. Forever is a very hard concept to make the mind accept. So, really, when you think of what you seem to be and what everything else seems to be, okay, we can progress in that world. It's the relative world, the world of relativity. You've got to have different parts to relate, relativity. But there's another way to approach whatever you see, whatever you register. I use the word see as simply an indication of registration. So again, if you were looking at someone you know, and at first they are they and you are you, and you're the subject, they're the object, okay. And then you kind of don't make a big deal about distinction, and you don't emphasize this subject-object relationship, but instead you open your heart, or find the bottom of it, or the very interior of your heart. It's a symbolic language, but it probably has something to do with what the heart center can do. We have a lot of hearts, between the shoulder blades, top of the head, causal body. The monad itself is a 12-fold heart center, and on. So if you're looking at that other person and your heart is open, does anything drop in? It's not really a thing. Does something happen? Maybe it's intuition. In German it means Einfall. It falls in. You still see whatever it is, the person, a few people, whatever, but something formless happens. Or maybe it doesn't happen, it's just always there, The happening is with the perceiver, or the infusiver, as I would say. It's like you can perceive parts and pieces, and you infusive wholeness, formless wholeness. It's very subtle and it's very quick. And if you try to force anything, it's not going to work. It's just the eradication of the limitations of form. We don't imagine that the form actually disappears in front of your eyes or your imagination, but, that's another exercise to make the form disappear into light or form into formlessness. But this can happen even when the form is just as it was, only it's not. The masters know this, and they have achieved isolated unity. However, we isolate the whole within the variety. We're not, masters are practical people. They're going to deal with the Mahamaya. They're going to deal with the illusion, which we have become. I notice I didn't use the word created. I'm using the word become. They're going to be very, very practical. You read Master Morya, he says you've got to have mastery of all things as you would over a block of ice. And it's a very interesting choice that he made, because it has to do with that which seems to be concrete but melts and vaporizes and so forth. So once you anchor into this, and it becomes more and more you, this thing that you've anchored into, and this little emanation becomes less and less you, though you've got to deal with it, then you can turn your infuception in any direction. You just have a good starting point. Maybe something that will always work for you, that you will register, you will see, you will have the heart activation, and then the sameness will appear. So find a good starting point. You may have to practice on that. And then we're on our way to overcoming that great heresy of separateness. We deal with the Mahamaya, which is the universe and all of its parts and pieces. And at the same time, we realize that we are the universal Logos, out of whom all this became. To practice a little bit, if you've hooked it, if it's there with you now, practice turning it on anybody, on a plant, on a dog, on a rock. There is a tipping point. And when that tip happens, you'll know something you didn't know before it happened. so much depends on the ability to continue to register form and yet discount its reality, not its actuality, but its reality. And then we start to realize that we are, all of us, this isness, this identicality, this, different words for different people, this presence. And then, life really begins to change. And instead of just manas, we now have buddhi manas. And further intensifications of beingness, of the in-universe type, yes, okay. But that's all we can do right now, because we are in universe. And the universe isn't going away, this universe, for how many trillions and trillions and trillions of Earth years. So once you're anchored through infuception into this thing that fell in and is there, this variety of the no thing, then intensify it and practice it and turn it in every direction. And don't bother, is it good, is it bad? Is this pretty, is this beautiful, is this ugly? Forget it. It just is. And whenever you can find something that is, you're it. And without the heart, this just doesn't happen. As I say, there are lots of hearts, and probably this is the beginning of monadic perception. The monad is a heart. One little hint he gives on that. So let's see if we can sustain a little. It's very elusive, comes and goes, not for the great souls, who have worked their way up and in, but for people like us, it comes and goes. But we have the will to the continuity of being, the will to the continuity of isness, of presence, of sameness, of formlessness. And we keep at that, practicing. It's a spiritual discipline. It will sound an Om, just to confirm some of these ideas. Talking about them is okay. It's not enough. Every day, a little practice in being what you see. Being what you register. The universal deity has many self-perceptions, and we are one of them, down here on our low level, and so is every atom and molecule and subatomic particle and bubble in the koilon, all those tiny things, and every kingdom of nature and every bit of the variety that is found in cosmos, of which we know practically nothing. The universal logos has its own self-perception, which in a way, according to its scope, makes these things. And we are awakening to the variety, and our dharma is to deal with the variety until it approximates the archetype, the universal archetype. And at the same time, we need that closure which eats up all space and time and reminds us in a way that's beyond words that everything we register is ourselves, which is the one self finally. Contained, finitized, yes, in a universe, but still we're after the essence. We're getting the essence now. The great forgetfulness is when the universe comes into being. That's the forgetfulness of absolute infinitude. Now this is all beyond our normal daily striving and the attempt to work well as a disciple and help the cause, and we remain very aware of the relativity and how it has to be worked out according to the plan of that particular emanation in which we live and move and have our being, just as that emanation lives and moves and has its being within a greater emanation. So we remain aware of our job in finitude. And there I don't mean infinite, I mean in the state of finitude. We deal with finitude. And at the same time, we know progressively that we shall discover ourselves to be the only thing that is, and that is absolutely infinite. Okay, we'll have then an Om to close this consideration. Okay, thank you, friends. If the language doesn't make sense yet, it will. And if the experience isn't quite caught, it will be. And once you catch it, it only becomes more intense, So we just have to have faith and patience. All right, so let me, before we go any further, is there anything anyone would like to ask or state? Remember, we're searching for what we really are. We have to deal with what we seem to be, but we don't want to get stuck in that and think that that's all there is. It's much greater. And that's a source of joy as one begins to discover what and who one really is, and then it becomes even more joyous in certain moments, maybe, when you discover that everybody else is as well, and there's just a great oneness implicate in the whole presentation of variety. So when you're looking for yourself, there's a little self and there's a big self. And when I say big self, I don't mean just the soul, which is wonderful, okay, or the monad and so forth. I mean big self, only to discover that there's no extension to it, so it can't be big or little. Anyway, that's another problem. Are there anything you would like to ask or say, or just raise your hand or ask to speak or whatever, and we can do that. We can do that at this point. Probably some of you are asking, what am I doing in a course like this? Is this a course after all? But I'll tell you how it happened to me. I met a teacher. I was an artist, opera director, singer, whatever, all the Ray Force stuff. And I was on my way to a dance rehearsal because I was a member of a folk dance troupe. And I'd been noticing this old fellow, I guess at the time he was 75. And, really the epitome of the sage. This was at the University of Michigan. And I realized I was on a place called the Diagonal. So I had different ways to turn. And I don't know. I saw the opportunity and I didn't go to the dance rehearsal. I just veered off and approached this sage, I guess I could call him. And that was the beginning. I mean, picking up the threads, I might say. And, the first thing he said to me, because he was kind of it's January. Something like that. The sun was shining, but it was coldish. The sun was shining. And he was sitting on a bench, and he put his hand on the bench, and the first thing he said to me, the more it resists, the hotter it gets. I figured there was a lesson in that for me. So for 7 years I was a student, and I learned that what he was teaching, well, more, like being, very fierce person, first-rate personality, probably second-rate soul. I learned that identification was what he was all about, and that I resolved, doing many things, continuing opera, doing other things, and continuing teaching in the level of mind and all the rest. I knew that identification was the thing. That seemed to be the curriculum of being. And there's a lot of ways to approach. It depends on your monadic ray, or rays. So I don't say this is the only way to deal with it. Some people might just walk into it, out of complete power, of complete love and all that, and they're just there. I mean, I don't take from anybody's method. Anybody can have any method that works, but I just share with you how it all got started. And, I was chastised for not making the dance rehearsal, person 20 years old, but I knew I had made the right choice. Okay, anybody have something you want? Here we go. All right, I got something here, and it's Bruno. And, okay, so a point of light in. an interconnected web of light, infinitesimally small and infinitesimally present in each form of differentiation, all connected, all being. Well, that's it. What you're doing there is you're formulating in your own language how this almost inexpressible thing can be expressed. And one of the things we're going to deal with as it comes time is the mystery of the point, the real point, the true point, and the virtual point, the point that's not really a point at all. How do you have a dimensionless something with no time and space, and yet it is? That's a point. So we're going to deal with that, and however it works for you to evoke this oneness apprehension, then you go with that. And we're going to do a lot of work on the infinitesimal. Now you might think it's just the domain of mathematics, and if you're doing like rigorous mathematics, it's the domain of mathematics, okay? But it's just going to get us to think about the very, very large and the very, very small, the infinitely large and the infinitely small. And we're going to, I remember that book I mentioned, that The Family of Man, all those photographs. To the wise man, it said, this Buddhist monk was pondering, to the wise man, there is neither the great nor is there the small. So, somehow we transcend all of that. And we just develop certain perspectives which are not where our usual mind would carry us. Now, it all seems a little, is this of any use whatsoever? And I contend that it's going to lead to the bliss response, but not the impractical bliss response, a very practical bliss response, which is the third phase, happiness, joy, and bliss. And as long as there is not this isness or this oneness or this presence, that bliss response is not going to be there. You may be happy or sad, you may be joyful or not, but the complete unity is required, or more than the unity, the oneness. The word oneness has become trite, and there's people make fun of it and all that. There's a lot of ways to get there, and really we're always there, and we'll realize that later in timeless time. We'll realize we're always there, and the whole thing is a big drama, dance or play or whatever, and we are involved in it infinitudinously over and over, and always with a new creative project, a new algorithm, a new archetype. Well, the old saying, God is not God unless he can create the stone he cannot lift. Think about that. So you're sort of going into the universe with one hand tied behind your back. But why this should be, well, there's no good reason, but just to say that absolute infinitude requires finitude. In other words, the greatest of all infinities requires the finite. And so in every universe we are acting this out, and I guess we better be happy about it once we discover what's going on and joyful and blissful about it. So thank you for that, Bruno. We will get into the infinitesimal and so many mysteries with infinity, It's like with certain things, you never get there, but you do. The old saying, Achilles and the rabbit are running against each other, and how does either one of them finish the race when you go, you take a step and the next one you go half as far, and then you go half as far and half as far? Does it ever reach the point? These are the paradoxes of Zeno, who was, there was a pre-Socratic philosopher by the name of Parmenides. And I think Zeno and Parmenides, I think they were closely related, in a way. And the Parmenides was a great unitist. He was he was in the oneness all the time. And Zeno's paradoxes, some of them were meant to reinforce that point of view because there was no logic otherwise. It's like the arrow going halfway each time. How does it ever get there? And I don't know that anybody has completely answered those questions. What's important is just not to be alienated. So many people are dying of opioid and drug overdose, and they're in despair and they're dying, and it's their view of themselves and of the universe that is killing them. And we have to straighten that out as much as possible. Never totally, because we can't. We're just little human beings, but we can certainly offer some improvements that help them get beyond terrible cases of mistaken identity. You see it all the time, and according to what a person thinks he or she is, so they act. And that's why we do not have, in so many cases, the true wisdom in action. Okay, other, we're gonna get into the point. I've got to finish. I can't finish, but I keep on sending you things on sameness, and every day I work on it. And I make sure my heart is open, or at least the concentration is there, and I make sure I'm really aware of subtle changes. You can't go into this in a crude way, because this thing, or whatever it is, or however the old sages described it in the old days, it is the subtlest of the subtle. Okay, so here's Loretta, and it's a great spiritual quest to be aware of awareness. It's like there's, it's like a superior consciousness viewing the normal consciousness, and it goes back ad infinitum. Saint, I'm going to lose his name, but he's the one who has the wonderful relationship with all the animals and for peace. And he's one of the most famous saints, that I'm losing his name. I'm sure that you know who I mean. Some people have thought it was Master Kutumi, but I think the vibration is different. How can I forget that? But anyway, the form doesn't hold it anymore. But what he did say was, what we're looking for is what's doing the looking. We are looking for that which is doing the looking. So, there's being, there's consciousness, and there's intelligence, or there's the subject, the object, and the relation between. There's all these triplicities. I kind of think, my impression is that within absoluteness there is no quality whatsoever except all of them which St. Francis, thank you, Tia, except all of them which are subsumed by utter otherness. In other words, there's a state of incomparable, and it can't be compared to anything else, incomparable beingness in this one, you can call it existence, okay, the absolute, the absoluteness. It's incomparable, and its beingness is so infinitely intense that nothing else is needed within it. There's nothing to do but to continue forever to be its utter otherness. It's absolute, and it's even, we could call it God if we want, but I use that in a specialized way. This, whatever it is, the only thing that is in the divine Pymander, they start talking about the only one thing, the only thing that is. They don't mean this, but the absoluteness is invariable, immutable, forever, and its beingness is so absolutely absolute, so utterly utter, that you don't need consciousness, you don't need intelligence, you don't need any division that functions in relativity. Now, that's a stretch, okay? That's a stretch. And, but think about that. That, in order to have intuition, intelligence, feeling, emotion, whatever, you need division. You need that there's this, and then there's the whole in which it is contained. And my theory here, my thought about this is the indivisible. The thing that we most deeply are, the utter otherness, whatever, if you have the patience, that is indivisible. And there's even the very highest qualities don't belong in it because they already are in it through utter intensity of beingness. Okay, that's language. I don't want to go too far. But it's always good to have in the back of your mind that this is a drama. And horrible things happen and beautiful things happen, and then they're over. And you're reminded one day that this is the universal Maya, or the universal Maha-Maya. There's also a super-universal thing that I'll get into talk about that. But we're involved in the universal Maha-Maya. And that's as it should be in a way, but not not forgetting this immutable something else, the eternal parent, different words to describe it. I went a little crazy when I wrote my Infinity book, and I came up with 241 names for what should not be named. But, it's all my own way of trying to get at it, at least to see what it's not. And then ever closer, ever closer, ever closer. Okay, well, I was grateful to Tia for offering us St. Francis. I can't believe I forgot St. Francis. Oh, my. I think he was a great sixth-ray adept. And, with a second-ray monad. But not Master K.H., who is far too scholarly in his approach, and had already conquered much of what St. Francis had to go through in terms of licentiousness in the early part of his life. You know, it's interesting when we study esotericism, or the study of incarnations, and everybody is offering you helpfully, oh, this one was really this one, and well, if you go back far enough, you'll find that this person was really that person, and sometimes it's true and sometimes it's false. We learn from the Tibetan that Jesus, now the Master Jesus, was the high priest Joshua. Then before that he was the initiate priest Jeshua, not the high priest. And before that he was Joshua, son of Nun, the great general. Now he doesn't take us any further back than that, but that's enough. That's enough to get the idea of how people widen out. I mean, obviously, this Joshua in the days of Canaan was a fearsome force. And he conquered those people, whether there was a right of the Hebrews to do that or not. He conquered them under the guidance of Moses, Master M. Of M we learn, not only Maurya, a Rajput prince now, but Akbar the Great, and I keep on circling around Charlemagne to wonder that. And he was a certain Russell M, who appears in the desert in that wonderful Rurik painting. And then he was, according to the Tibetan, King Solomon, the Wise. A lot of similarities in the kind of courts they had, Akbar, Charlemagne, Solomon. They had a certain kind of court which was very inclusive and characterized by great wisdom and beauty. And then Moses, earlier. And before that, who knows? I mean, who knows? But it's interesting, someone we trust the Tibetan. He tells us, what that stream was. And we know the lion, although the mystery man, he's the Master Rakotsi right now, Master R, but, he was Le Comte de Saint-Germain. He was that, and he was Francis Bacon, and he was Roger Bacon, and he was Saint, I don't know, the word Anselmos comes to me, but it's not exactly that. Anyway, he gave up his life in the early centuries AD for the teaching, for the good way. And maybe he was Hiram Abiff, who is the great architect of King Solomon's temple. So a lot of those characters, they have a connection with the previous solar system. And, St. Paul, the present Master Hilarion, was the Iamblichus, the great Neoplatonic theurgist. He was very powerful. Well, he's got a first-ray monad, And he was St. Paul before that, or Paul, just Saul, And I don't know if DK takes him back any further than that, but very fierce man. And sometimes turning that fierceness in a very destructive way on people, and later converting as Christ met him on the road to Damascus. So we can be pretty sure about those reincarnational figures that the Tibetan has given us, but mostly when we go to guess, we're probably way off, Anyway, all this started by me saying I don't think St. Francis was Master Kutumi, just from the qualitative angle. but they were both great in their own way. So, is there anything else, friends, that you would like to say or ask or think about? I know, I mean, in the realm of the intellect per se, we have a lot of words. And it's always easy to come up with words. And, you study Master DK and his meticulous entirety. And some people who get tired of it, they call it ridiculous entirety. But okay, he just details everything, And yet he says he's not giving you but the tiniest ABC. So, you can question a lot about those things. But when it comes to the great simplicities of life, there's got to be a different approach. And that's why, I have a strong third ray. I make up a lot of words to try to get around conventional interpretation. And, I hope to hang in there and, well, I know one day I'll succeed, of course, and we all will, because we're it, You're it. The children's game of hide and go seek, you're it. Well, we have to remember that when we get sad and depressed and feel sometimes that it's not going anywhere and that it's futile. Just remind yourself of what's really going on here. I remember somewhere in the books, DK is going through asserting the fact. And when you get to the end of his list, you realize that he's asserted the fact, it's the first ray word of power, or a translation of the first ray word of power. He's asserted the fact in such a way that you really begin to feel very positive, I am this, I am that, I am. And it builds up a case of positivity. We do need that positivity above all else, I think, in these very trying times when the personal nature of humanity is rebelling against its soul nature. I have to be a little bit careful about how much I do here, because, there can be like overload, and when you're eating things that you're not used to, it can be tough, and you can get sick, So I try not to go too far. If you have questions, of course, I can address. I wrote this up today. Generally, the idea is that, okay, there's reality and there's Maya. And ultimately, there's only reality. And anything that we perceive as illusion, Maya, is essentially reality, but not actually so. In terms of the actuality, it looks like what it is, and but essentially it is reality. But we are much more used to thinking of ourselves in a really small way. This is my mother, my father, this is my job, this is my wife, these are my children, this is where I live, this is my city, this is my country. We're used to thinking in these small particulars. And I don't think we have a big problem dealing with the relative self. We can probably identify what we are relatively and what we've done with our life, and where we've made mistakes and where we have had successes. All of that is not a problem. Maybe courage enters in there. You have the courage to look at it and say it as it is. Okay, that's a rather quick identification. I am this here, this personality, and maybe, you know, this inner being and so forth. I am that. Okay. But if you slip into yourself as, I say here, being, you know, that's universal being, as absolute being, well, how did it happen? And what does that really mean to us at all? See, I mean, when we think of ourselves, which now and then we have to do, in the non-relative sense, what do we think of? I mean, you know, I'm working on thinking about pure being, pure isness, pure presence, pure reality. I'm working on those things. Not trying to force the category on my experience, but trying to evoke the experience by whatever means. Anything goes. If it works for you, it works. So that, you know, and that's a much rarer kind of quest. A lot of people would think, you know, there's not much use to it. But like I say, you know, almost since I was quite a young person, I've been after that, realizing that it is the simplest, the most real, and for some reason very, very elusive state or realization. But you know, you realize that realizing this presence is inevitable in this universe, so you might as well get on with it now. And contrast that with your busy intellect. I mean, you know, I've been told I think too much, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, okay. And I've got a busy intellect. Yes, I do. But, you know, also there is the substratum, or, you know, as I say in another coined word, the substandingness. The substandingness. And when I say substance, I don't mean matter. I mean isness, you know, being. So it's a whole new curriculum, and it's very ancient, and yet it's new to a lot of us, and we can always refine it. Is there anybody that would like to ask a question or offer a thought? You know, I mean, I really know what it's like to approach this language and to approach isness. You know, I somehow know what it's like, and it's not easy. I've got a lot of things that could be said, but I don't want to overwhelm with verbiage, you know. You know, the third ray is throat center and all that. So, you know, it's possible to say too much. Basically, we're on a quest to determine what reality is. Once we have the sense of the higher power, soul or whatever you want to call it, soul, monad, higher power, whatever you want to call it, okay, that's really the beginning. And from there, you can keep on widening, lifting the veil, widening, lifting, expanding the horizon till you're carrying less and less and less and less, and returning to what you were at the origin, having somehow acted out the archetype, which is also you. Okay, Damien, I see you're there. So let's see now. You're self-muted. So if you unmute yourself, you can speak. There you go.
Hi. I was just thinking about this, what you were saying about identification, right? I remember I was reading, a couple of years ago, DK, he was talking about harmlessness and to have the ability to live harmlessness in that state. And I pondered on that for nearly a year, and what that actual word means, to really go into it, and how vast that actual statement is. But I've got into the habit of just going around my daily life, and I'll recognize the light in myself and in everybody I meet. Now, I don't analyze it or intellectualize it. It's just something that I've made myself to be consciously aware of, something I do. And relating that to what you're talking about, identification, when I started to listen to your webcasts, it just sits with me in what you're saying, not in an intellectual, not intellectualizing it, or not even if I was having a conversation with you and we were conversing. It's more internal. It's not a feeling. It's very strange. It's very difficult for me to actually put into words.
But I get, yeah.
Yeah, but this thing about, recognizing the light in everybody, and that stemmed from reading that passage, because certain times when I'm reading the literature from DK, things will actually pop out, and maybe there's certain things that I need to work on personally.
Exactly.
Yeah, but I do this thing that I actually trained myself to do on a conscious level now. I just acknowledge the light, and I've been doing that for the last couple of years. And yeah, I mean, it works for me.
It sounds right, right on.
Yeah,
I mean, it's better than being lost in all the words. I can tell you from bitter experience. But I can tell you that. But okay, everyone, it's the Antakarana, and the Antakarana is the way back to being what we are. That's really what it is. Here is a quotation on harmlessness, which is my favorite, and I'm just going to read it, and you probably know where it is. It's in White Magic, page 102 and 103. Yeah. Harmlessness is the expression of the life of the man who realizes himself to be everywhere. That's a big one. Who lives consciously as a soul, whose nature is love, whose method is inclusiveness, and here we go, and to whom all forms are alike, in that they veil and hide the light and are but externalizations of the one infinite being. So, this took me quite far, and I realized that the pursuit of the infinite is all part of the pursuit of harmlessness as well. And when you... go ahead. Yeah.
I was just going to say that, that what you read out, it can be boiled down to just that one single word.
Yep.
The ability to live harmlessness, and what that one word actually means when you really go into it. It's vast.
Yeah. Yeah, to live harmlessly, harmlessness, however you want to pronounce it. That is a tremendous discipline, and it requires such acute sensitivity to do that. Yeah. Now, this other one
but
here. Go ahead.
No, go on.
No, this is the other thing here. The 6 seeds of all philosophy, and you've seen it, and it's older than the stanzas of Dzyan, and basically it really comes up with the affirmation that we are God. Finally, it gives you time and space and unity and all that, and the only thing that ever starts it and remains is God. And everything disappears, but nothing is touched. That's why I kind of like the idea of the untouchable. In the caste system of India, we've got a problem with the lowest caste, the untouchables, but the greatest of all beings is the untouchable, untouched and unafraid. So, we need to expand everything very, very big and then get right down to the practical thing that's right in front of you and how to
Hmm.
treat that in the right way. Yeah, Damien, appreciate your thoughts on this. And
Wonderful meditation, by the way.
okay, thank you. Well, it is
Yeah.
whatever happens,
Yeah.
because I just don't
Yeah, absolutely.
I
Yeah.
don't know what's going to happen. Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll be
Okay, bye.
talking to you. Okay, okay, friends. Let's see where we are here. So Damien had a thought, and anything anyone would like to say. Tomorrow I go traveling. That's my problem. I'll be in the morning with Science of Triangles. It's a rather difficult section there, which I seem to be trying to avoid. Um, and it's about the function of certain zodiacal signs that are combined with each other, and what these groups of signs mean. But I'll give it a stab, and we'll see how it works. And then by evening, I hope that Tuya can handle the triangles thing, because I'll be on a train, and that's at 5 p.m. GMT. And if I detect that there's any hope with transmission, I may try to show up for just some kind of question and answer session about occultism in general. So whatever's on your mind, and I don't say I have the answers, but I mean, at least I can give you my thought. So I'll see what happens on that train. I just don't know how steady the reception will be. I don't know. So that's the plan, and then of course we move on with our work with the Ask program, and every week to do the reappearance, and every week to do the money meditation and Soul of Nations every week. I mean, I think it's important as much as may be possible, given our busy lives and so forth. So Tuya and I will keep up that the best we can. And, to the extent that you can be with us on that, that's great. And we're happy about that. Now let's see. Oh, wow. Okay, so here's something I think that, yeah, it looks like, okay, we've got a few other things here. And Stacy, did I hear correctly that you said we are looking for that which is doing the looking? I said doing the looking. St. Francis in that case. And Ishtar, it looks like, is offering something here. Thank you, Michael, for seeding the mind. Yeah, I figure one of my jobs is to so stress the mind that it falls apart and reveals the intuition. I'm pretty good at mind stressing, and it's just, it can only hold so much, and then you need a new faculty to handle what's higher. Okay, so seeding the mind and contemplate and open the door to knowing of the truth of the oneness. Yeah, it's been a thing. This has been my experience. When we know the infinite creator, it happens without warning. I think for people like ourselves, it certainly does. Maybe the masters can somehow invoke at will that because they're more closely identified, but, we'll see when we're a master. It happens without warning. It can happen in a variety of ways, through experience, contemplation, a mantra, dreams. Yeah, who's to say? If a fly can open the door for this Tibetan sage, oh golly, he was kind of overshadowed by the Buddha, and why can't I think of his name? So you're doing well of thinking of names, and maybe we'll come up with his name too. But anyway, just a fly. That's it. Eureka, and there it was. And people find that sometimes the strangest thing will open the door to non-separativeness. The most important foundation of this flower of downloaded knowing is to do service in some way or to emanate loving devotion. I mean, our service is what we are. It's our radiation. We serve through radiation, says the Tibetan. This tunes us to the real truth of unity, attraction to the one through magnetism of the love energy. And I would say on our planet, in our solar system, this is absolutely true. We're going to have another solar system coming up, number 6, or the third major, and it'll be a will system, and some things may be a little different. Actually, DK does kind of discuss the way in which magnetism is related to the will. So not only to the love energy, but in a different way to the will. So right now, the great expenditure of love, because we all are units in the great heart of love, our solar logos, who is a really big heart center in the local cosmic logos. That's the way for us to go, regardless of what our rays may be. The love is the great revealer, at least in this solar system, and we're only halfway through this solar system. Whatever, page 384 of Cosmic Fire, it makes that point. So thank you for those wise thoughts. I am trying to figure out how I can get a time to do progressive Cosmic Fire with you. I might just do it spontaneously and say, hey, we've just been through a webinar. Now, if you're not exhausted, hang on and let's do Cosmic Fire. But anyway, I have some solo webinars which should help. And I have sent them via, I've sent them as what I receive. And if you press the button, you'll be able to download it. And Cosmic Fire number 2, 3, and 4 are in that form. And I struggled with 5, and I think finally it tried to hide on my computer, but I think I found it and caught it by the tail. Okay, so I'll get that to you as well. And I think we'll proceed in that method, that I'll do some solo stuff and we'll do some discussion together as often as we can. I try to keep it regular, but the problem is, I was doing it on a Wednesday, and that would make 3 2-hour webinars or broadcasts on a Wednesday. It might have been just a little bit too much. One has to try to survive one's broadcasting schedule. Okay. Well, friends, I think that's going to be it now. That's going to be it. So let's just... I had a lot more that I wanted to deal with, but like I say, it can be too much over the top, so just review this. See, when I write something like this, in brackets, like A with the infinity mark and a line through the infinity mark, I mean absolute infinitesimal. And if it didn't have that line through the infinity mark, it would mean absolute infinity. And, there's all kinds of infinities, and it's a whole nother world that, Georg Cantor tried to get us into, and he was a great mathematician, but he wanted to study infinity to prove the glory of God. He was a Pisces. But he had Jupiter and Uranus and Aries, which is, I think, why he really, went into this field. When you have Pisces and Aries like that, the big picture of infinitude really attracts you. And of course, he was a rigorously trained mathematician, so he would do it in the acceptable manner. And many were the, what should I call them, converts. People who really respected his work. So, but you see, the thing is, and I've just been thinking about this, the mathematician looks at these things as if they are events in the mind. In other words, like we invented somehow all of the different kinds of infinitudes, and our concept about them is important. That's what they think, and they still are in the attitude of the thinker who thinks about infinity. And what I'm saying, and that is the kind of the radical part of all this is, look, when you're talking about infinity, you're talking about yourself. And all these numbers and all of these relationships and all the things that are happening, you're talking about your real self. And I don't know so many mathematicians that are willing to take that jump, which they consider, probably on my part, to be preposterous. But I just go with what I think is actually happening, and I present it for better or for worse for those who may be interested in it. Okay, let's...
Michael, I just wanted folks to know I put in the chat box the Makara link for this new series on cosmic fire that you're related, and BL has put up all the programs up to number 4, and those will be continually updated.
Fantastic.
And then this series, Identify as Being, is also posted on Makara, and in the handouts is the latest updated version of the document, and that will also be posted on Makara. So if anyone has any questions about that, just let us know.
Yeah, take a little time now to copy that out, friends. Go into the chat box and copy what is there and just put it in a Word document, so that you don't lose what Joe has put there. It's easy to get lost. I'm getting lost all the time here. And today I thought my program number 5, which I was quite happy with, it was an hour and a half, and I said, oh my gosh, the computer ate it. The computer ate program 5. Okay. But then I stuck with it for 3 hours and found it. So I'll try to get that to you also. Whether it's on MP4 or WMV or whatever kind of video it's on, some are bigger, some are smaller. Okay, this is a pretty big file. So I'll just get that to Joe and BL, and somehow it will appear where it should be. And we'll talk about YouTube at a later point. So just copy this out. I think they can, Joe, right? They can go to their chat box and just cut and paste, right? I think they can. Okay. Maybe I'm just trying to... Yeah, I just start at the bottom, and I'm working my way all the way to the top, and I'm highlighting everything that's in that chat box. Now I press Control-C, and I go over here to any kind of document like this, make a new document, and hope for the best. There it is. So that's everything that was in the chat box, and if there's anything there that is...
I put all the comments of all the contributors, and then down at the bottom, the last 2 are the Makara pages.
Okay, I hope I've done it right.
You got it there. Yes.
Okay.
It's down at the bottom.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Joe. Appreciate that. All right, friends. Now let's just close off our work. Basically, we are working in this universe. I guess that comes as a surprise to no one. And the universe is just one of so many, we can't count them, according to the Great Breath idea and the law of periodicity. And we have to do our job here as ever, as best we can. And that's not easy. given our shrinkage. We've been attenuated. We may start out as a universal logos, but through deliberate self-perceptual reduction, reduced self-perception, the emanations become tinier and tinier and tinier. So we begin to wake up in a certain stage of our tininess, having made the turn, and kind of like the prodigal son saying, whoa, this is really a limited life. And there's a lot more here, and I am free to pursue it. And hopefully I will pursue it wisely. So people like you and me, we're waking up to our limitations, and we are trying to pursue that which is greater, step by step by step, graded, gradual, and so forth. And we keep going, every life, more and more, wider and wider, unveiling, and till we really begin to get an idea, not just an idea, not just a thought, but an experience or an inperience of what we are. Meanwhile, we're fooled, we have a lot of mistaken identity, and we're kind of unhappy about it, unhappy about our little life, who at times is not given what lies behind. But okay, we start moving into joy, and then we will also move into one day the kind of bliss state that the masters have. Who are they after all? We have to get rid of the boundaries, right? And yet respect them when we're working in the world of relativity. It's always a dual thing. Okay, I guess you get it, and let's just return to something familiar, but think of it against the background of the great reality, the great invocation. From the point of light within the mind of God, let light stream forth into the minds of men. Let light descend on earth. From the point of love within the heart of God, let love stream forth into the hearts of men. May Christ return to earth. From the center where the will of God is known, let purpose guide the little wills of men, the purpose which the masters know and serve. From the center which we call the race of men, let the plan of love and light work out, and may it seal the door where evil dwells. Let light and love and power restore the plan on earth. Well, thank you, everyone, and many blessings, lots of love from the whole team, and we'll keep on trying to bring these deeper penetrations to you and to ourselves so we can continue to advance and fulfill the idea of progress onward. Okay, so that's all for now, and tomorrow morning a broadcast, no, it's not a broadcast, it's a webinar on the signs of triangles, and then although I'll be traveling and probably not too successful with intermittent internet, we'll see. I hope that Tuya can bring to you the normal triangles meditation. Then the next day we'll be on the evening schedule, Reappearance of the Christ and so forth. By that time I'll be there, but I think she'll be leading it. Okay? All right. Many blessings, lots of love, and we'll see you on the next occasion. Bye-bye.